This podcast is brought to you by New Life Ministries.
Welcome to the Every Man's Battle podcast. I'm your host, JJ West. On this podcast, you will hear honest conversation and encouragement for living a life of sexual integrity. Let's get to today's episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Every Man's Battle podcast. I am JJ West. I am your host, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the Orlando area. Get to work with individuals and couples dealing with sexual integrity issues. And I get to also serve as the presenter at the Every Man's Battle Intensive. And I'm alongside Doug Barnes. Hey,
JJ,
Doug.
how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Always good to be here.
Yeah.
Always good to engage in our dialogue about integrity.
Absolutely.
You know?
Tell these people who you are, though.
I am a licensed professional counselor from the Dallas area, Dallas, Texas, and I facilitate small groups for the Every Man's Battle Intensive. And in my practice, I help folks struggling with integrity issues, working with couples and individuals, helping them find a redemptive part of their story.
Fantastic. Well, as you said, it's so good to be alongside you. I can't wait to get to today's topic. Today, we are going to be talking about doing full disclosure. And it's really going to be the first in a two-part series. Today, we're going to look at some of the components around full disclosure, as well as some of the mistakes that people make in doing full disclosure that we hope we can share with you as a way to help you avoid making those same mistakes and hopefully having a more successful full disclosure. We're going to continue our discussion next week when we invite Laura Mangan McDonald to come in and share from her perspective, both as a participant in a full disclosure, but also as a therapist who walks people through full disclosure as well. We'll get to that next week. So today we want to do kind of lay the groundwork, do an introduction around full disclosure. And let's just start with why. Why is it important to do a full disclosure?
Well, I think one of the bigger reasons is to help us know ourselves.
Okay.
You know, it's not just about exposing all of my dirty laundry,
okay,
and all of the nasty
that's what most
stuff.
People think it is,
right.
Yeah. Okay.
And thinking through, okay, well, if I share all of this nasty stuff with my spouse, my group, my pastor, whoever it is, that they will think differently of me. They will withhold love from me.
Yes.
They will not accept me anymore. But as you've said, it's hard to accept acceptance of me, the real me. Who am I? And until we're fully known, because then we can be fully loved without any reservations.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't say it was easy,
right?
And I didn't say it didn't hurt, but I can be fully known. Yeah. It's like ripping my chest cavity open and saying, I want you to see the real me inside of me.
Yeah.
And to be okay with that.
Yeah. And I love what you said, that it's about a self-discovery, because I can't be fully known by another, inviting someone to come in and see the inner workings of me if I haven't explored that myself.
Right.
If I haven't uncovered that myself, if I haven't done that work, it's going to be impossible for me to then invite someone else into that space.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of that is done initially through the humility of, I need to do this for me.
Yes.
Whoever hears it just gets to benefit from it.
Yeah.
And so I need to do this work for myself, because again, I want to know the real me. And sometimes it's hard to want to know the real me.
Yeah.
Because of all the pain of all of my actions, my behaviors. You know, a lot of times we associate who I am with my behavior.
Right.
I'm this horrible guy who looked at porn, or I had affairs, or I went to strip clubs, or I was a voyeur, or I was a crossdresser, whatever. And so that's how we begin to see ourselves, especially if there are folks around us saying, you're nothing but a, and fill in the blank, whatever that is, right? Yeah. And in a full disclosure process, it helps us really integrate all those pieces of us, all of those pieces that are spiritual and physical and intellectual and emotional. It helps us put those together, breaking through that guilt and shame and that self-protection that I've been, I don't want to say hiding. I don't want to use that term in a negative way, but sometimes I'm not wanting to accept the reality myself of I did this or I did these things.
Right. Or even some of the pain from my story that may be the backdrop to leading me into those behaviors that I sometimes don't want to look at that because it's painful, it's ugly, it's maybe even produces shame in me. But I have to do that work.
Right. There's a movie called The Kid that has some great lines in it and great metaphor. There's a line where Russ is looking at Rusty and he says, every time I look at him, I see all of the memories I've spent a lifetime trying to forget.
Yes.
And that's a lot of what full disclosure, that's the stigma behind full disclosure.
Yeah. It's interesting because I do think there's a lot of people who think full disclosure is for married guys to do with their spouse. And that's true. That is often
that is true.
What happens. But in your practice, in my practice, any guy who comes in to see me to talk about sexual integrity issues, to talk about sexual integrity struggles, one of the very first things we do is we do a full disclosure history.
Right.
Like regardless of marital status, regardless of hopes of being married or not, we do that because, again, they need to know themselves. And you can't know yourself if you're not willing to go back and look at your own history.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so in writing, I like to do a timeline.
Yes.
And again, there are lots of schools of thought out there. I'm not saying this one is the only one or the right one or the end all be all, but I like to start with a timeline of significant life events. What can I look at in my life going back as far as I can remember, and just look at what are some of the significant, good or bad, right? But they're just significant to me.
Yeah.
Well, Doug, could it be this or could it be that? Yeah, sure. But everyone is different as far as how certain events in your life have been significant to you or to me.
Right.
So significant life events started, and then we start writing the story around it. We start filling in the gaps because it's not, I don't, again, there are lots of schools of thought out there how to do full disclosures. So there's not a one right way. If you're saying this is the only way, no, this isn't about that, but this is a way to start this process. And why it's important, because it really is important. And start looking at significant life events. Then we wrap the story around it. And that just takes time, especially the older that we are.
Right.
Like I go back to that quote, I'm trying to remember things that I've spent a lifetime trying to forget.
Yeah.
And so the more, and our brains are so powerful, the more we start to access those significant life events, the more some of these behaviors and situations, they become more present, right? The memories are stored in so many different pieces of our brain, right? That once we start accessing those different places, then some of the memories start to come a little easier, but it just takes time.
Yeah, it does.
It's not something to be done. And we talk about this at the intensive. It's not something to be done thinking about it on your drive home from the intensive.
I'll just take care of that in a half hour and I'll be finished. Yeah.
Right. I had one disclosure. I mean, we had one session talking about it. And the next time we met, next session, he had like a torn off piece of paper written in all kinds of diagonals. And he was saying, yeah, well, in 1977, I did this. In 1981, I did this. And it's like, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of say, okay, let's tap the brakes here.
Exactly.
Let's kind of start this process over. But I mean, he meant well.
Yeah. He was trying to do it, but he just didn't have maybe enough information on what needed to be included in a full disclosure.
Right. So it was understanding the process.
Yeah.
And my point to that was that it just takes time.
Yes.
It just takes time because our brains, because I want to recall something that happened 2 months ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, doesn't mean it's going to automatically happen.
Right.
And so it gives our brain enough time to work on it, and we can take our time and really be thorough.
Yes.
That's the key to full disclosure for me is thorough, not perfect, but thorough.
Yeah. Yes. That raises a good point, because you said earlier, well, there's not just one right way to do full disclosure. And I agree with that. There's not just one right way. And you've talked to maybe 20 different therapists. You might get 20 different versions of how to do a full disclosure. But I do think there are some key components that should be included in a full disclosure, regardless of maybe the practical ways that you go about it. And so, for instance, being thorough, not leaving anything out, like that's going to be key.
Right.
I would say humility would be another key component. If you're going to do a full disclosure with anyone, whether it's your spouse, your group, your small group, your pastor, your therapist, that you have to start with humility. That will allow you, one, the humility to look at your own story and not have to no, I'm better than that, but also the humility to say, I'm not going to be in this role of demanding things. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the podcast today. But I want to start with humility. Right?
Yeah. Rigorous honesty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And sometimes that's difficult, because the older that we get, the less detail we have a tendency to remember.
Right.
Okay. Again, not anything bad, but we need to allow for that in that space of humility, because if I am truly, and I hate to say it this way, but if I'm truly engaging in this full disclosure process, I need to embrace rigorous honesty and to know that I may write 2 pages, 10 pages, 20 pages, whatever it is, and I might be ready to present my full disclosure, to read it through. And the night before, I might be flooded by 4 different memories that I need to, hit pause and go, hold on. I need to go and I need to put this in because I've just remembered it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that sometimes happens, not in all cases, but it certainly happens. So writing it all out, editing it, that we want to take out any kind of blaming language, any kind of victim-y language, any kind of minimizing all those acting in things that we do. We want to, and that's why it's really good to do it with someone who's done this before.
Yes,
because they can read through this and say, okay, so the train ride that you took when you were 7, we don't really need to know about that, but we do need to know about the house that you were living in when you were 7, and the fact that someone was there who you didn't know and who kept coming into your room at night, or whatever. I'm just making it up, right? So going through the language and really saying, this is important from a disclosure perspective, especially when it comes to our sexual integrity.
Yeah.
There's a different type of disclosure that we're not talking about here. We're talking about sexual integrity primarily. Correct. But it's me connecting to my story. And I'm not talking about just my left brain. I'm talking about my left brain to my heart.
Right.
That this is the real me.
Yeah.
And this was my experience. Again, even to take the time to feel that pain again. I'm not saying it's good and I like it, but it helps me be rigorously honest to connect with the pain that I felt in whatever the situation was. And why is that important? Because that helps me connect then to my spouse's pain, to my significant other's pain.
To practice empathy.
It's very good to begin that process of empathy if I haven't gone there yet.
Yeah, agreed. Yes. So we talk about that it should be in writing. I agree, because that helps me to lay it out. And because not all the memories are stored in a chronological order.
Yeah,
a lot of times the memories are stored in an emotional order. And so something that happened to me when I was 6 connects with something that happened to me when I was 16. And I have to kind of sort that out as I'm presenting it. But it's helpful to do it in writing. When I do disclosures in my office, I have the offending party do the written disclosure. I usually then have if they're married or they're engaged, the offended party write what's called an impact statement.
Right.
Here's how your
Share a little bit about what
behavior
that is.
has impacted my life.
Right.
This is the result of it. It's not just, oh, we're in counseling now, or oh, we're on the verge of divorce. Those might be part of it, but it's also how I'm viewing myself, how I'm viewing our relationship, whether I can trust you anymore, whether I feel like I can trust any man anymore, right?
Right.
So it's
Right.
it's giving that person the opportunity to voice in some way how you're acting out behavior, and usually even more so your deception around your acting out behavior,
the history around
you're hiding, you're lying,
Mhm.
your half truths, that the impact of that on my life and
Right.
on my heart, right? That's important.
And it's empowering as well, because
Mhm.
it gives that party, it gives that person agency. It
Yes.
says, okay, knowing all of this,
Mhm.
can I spend the rest of my life
Mhm.
or dating relationship or whatever
Right.
it is? Can I accept this
Mhm.
as a way of understanding you,
Mhm.
and in relation to me, how that's going to fit together in our relationship going forward?
Mhm. Right. Exactly.
And that can be so scary.
It can be extremely
so
scary. I mean, I've had wives who kind of like your guy that you were talking about, where scribbled a few things on a torn off piece of paper. Like, I've had some wives come back with their impact statement being that small, and that um the lack of thoroughness, because it's so scary, because it's so painful,
Right.
that they
Getting in touch
don't.
with the pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay. So disclosure, then an impact statement, and then that's followed up with an amends letter from the offender, the one who did the acting out behavior. An amends letter that's not just a "I'm sorry I hurt you," or "I'm sorry if you were hurt," right? That's not what we're talking about. An amends letter is, here is what I have done, what I am doing, and what I will do to repair what I broke.
Right.
That's an amends letter.
Right. As
Okay.
almost as if it hadn't happened in the first place,
Mhm.
to the best of my ability.
Yeah, I want to
wanna
try and
repair it.
restore. I want
Right.
to repair
Right.
what has been broken, and here's what I'm doing, what I have done, what I am doing, and what I will do to bring about that repair. So it's not just an expression of sorrow or contrition. That's included.
Important.
That's part of it. Okay, so don't leave that out. Don't go,
Right,
oh, Jay
right.
just said it's not supposed to be about me
Right.
telling you I'm sorry. Yes, that's part of it, but it's not only an expression of, hey, I'm sorry for breaking your heart. I'm sorry for lying to you for the last 25 years. But it's also, here's how I'm going to rebuild trust with you.
Right.
Here's how
Right.
I'm going to put boundaries in my life so that I don't go down these paths again.
Right. Address my character, address my triggers, address all of those things that took me in that way in the first. And that's part of the clinical process or intensive at, we talk about those things at EMB.
Yeah.
But also that's the recovery work.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just, will provide me a list of things to do. I'll do those, and we're going to be, we're done, right? We're out.
Exactly.
And it's more than that. It's way more than that. So it's like you said, it's the integration of the old man, the broken part of me, of my behaviors, because they've had an impact on you, and the integration of the new man exhibiting godly character and getting into putting in boundaries and understanding triggers and how to walk forward with other men as a way of working my recovery, rather than just being that recovery-minded guy.
Right. Absolutely.
New Life Ministries saved my completely broken marriage.
No matter how much hurt you've had to face, no marriage is beyond hope. At New Life Ministries Intimacy and Marriage Weekend, licensed counselors will help you rebuild communication skills and renew your commitment to each other. You don't have to settle for a miserable marriage or even one that's just okay. It's possible to experience a new level of intimacy and have a great marriage. To register or to find out more, call 1-800-NEW-LIFE or online at newlife.com.
One of the things that I want to include in doing a disclosure, a full disclosure, is adequate care for the partner who is receiving the disclosure.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that might mean One, doing it in the office of a therapist who's trained to do disclosures. That might be in making sure, like if she's already working with a therapist, making sure that that therapist is present or available afterwards. It might be allowing for her to go and spend the weekend with her sister or her best friend or whomever, people who care for her if she needs to have some distance from you.
Right.
But it's, finding out what are the things that will provide care for her. So we're not just handing her here's the truth about you, about your life, about your marriage, about your family. This bomb gets set off and then, all right, well, I'll see you. You'll be fine. Right. No, I want to make sure that there's adequate care in place for her.
Right. Or if she doesn't want to spend that time away, then I need to spend that time away as a way for her to be safe in her own home, where she can curl up with a blanket, with a pillow, with her favorite cup of tea or whatever that may be, that helps her have that safety and stability after hearing all of this stuff. Right. I have lots of guys who say, well, she knows all of this. Okay, she may know it all, but you just read it in chronological order.
Right.
And the impact of that, the way our brains hear that is completely different than, in 2010, you gave her, oh, yeah, well, I did this and sorry about that. In 2014, yeah, I've been doing this for 2 years. In 2016, yeah, well, I did sleep with her, but, it's all that information. But in chronological order, it impacts our spouses or significant others way differently. And so we need to take that extra care, not only in our offices, like having her therapist or her coach or whoever, but also afterward, like you said, if she wants to go spend that time with her favorite people or safe gals, that's great. Or we need to take care to go spend the night in a, if it's appropriate and it's not a,
if that's what she, if that's care for her, right? Because don't go, oh, JJ and Doug said I have to leave, so I've given you the disclosure, now I got to go.
Free day.
Because that may be terrifying.
Right. Exactly.
Her, right. So we find out what is caring for her heart.
Right. And we don't, and I was just going to go there, but we don't want to take that leeway and say, oh, I'm going to think through this for you. And I'm going to go, spend the night with my buddies over here. No. Yeah. It's only under that protection of her safety.
Yeah.
Where does she feel the safest? Is it me being at home? Is it me being in the basement? Is it me being in the spare bedroom? Where is that for her after she's just heard this long document and she's absorbing all of that information so that she can, I've had lots of spouses, they read through it and then they read through it again and then they read through it again. And so the next morning, there's 20 questions that say, hey, you told me this, but this is what I remember, and then it's having that humility again and that empathy to walk through it again over and up. There's not an expiration date on our story.
That's right.
There's not an expiration. Yeah. And we need to be willing to have
no statute of limitations on the questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They can come 5 minutes or 5 years or 15 years later.
Right. Yeah. And to realize that all behavior is purposeful. So she's not asking this to attack me. She's asking this so that she can make sense of her life.
Yeah.
The life she thought she had. Yeah. And then the life now that we've outlined and said, no, this is the way that your life was.
Right. Here's reality.
Yes. Yeah. And that can be very sobering.
So speaking of things that she might need, what about a polygraph? Is that something that we who are doing the disclosure, who are disclosing, is that something we should agree to? Should we say yes to that?
If our spouses, significant others, clinicians, coaches, counselors, mentors, if that comes up, we need to be saying yes before they finish the sentence.
Yeah.
Because that's it. A lot of this, we talked about humility. A lot of this comes down to our willingness. Are we willing to do whatever it takes to restore our relationship, to restore our marriage or dating relationship or whatever that is? And that over resounding yes while sometimes it can be scary
Mm-hmm.
because there's a stigma around that in our culture,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
We don't have any other way of measuring
Mm.
truth telling,
Yes,
the
that's right.
empirical way of truth
Right.
telling. And that's
Right.
sad that my word is not good enough anymore, but
Right.
it has no currency.
Right, because right,
By definition.
I have broken trust with you. I have proven to be someone who's not trustworthy, and now I'm saying, but just trust me.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't
Right.
work. Yeah.
Right. And so yes, and we need to be the ones to 5 minutes after our conversation, I need to be researching, okay,
Mhm.
who can I talk to? Who can I
Mhm.
go to? I need to set
Mhm.
this up. I need to
Mhm.
run it by you and say, okay, this is what I've set up. This is the
Yeah.
time. Does that work for you? If not, then I need to call him back.
Yeah.
Not waiting on her to go, hey,
Did you
have you done that yet? Have you
Yeah,
called that guy yet? Have
exactly.
you called
Yeah.
that polygrapher yet? No. That's
Mhm.
not good recovery.
Yeah.
We need to own our recovery, and especially when it comes to this.
Yeah. But Doug,
I hate it when you say
polygraphs
that.
are expensive. They're expensive, and I've heard stories of false positives. People who were telling the truth, but the polygraph said they were lying. So maybe I shouldn't do it.
If I'm a husband and my wife wants one, again, before she finishes the sentence,
Yes.
I need to be saying,
Yeah.
let me get on the phone with my counselor, coach, mentor, pastor, and let me or my group, because a lot of times in group there will be someone who's had one. You do that research ASAP. You don't put that off.
Yeah.
And you make that happen as soon as possible.
Agreed.
And again, there are lots of schools of thought out there. We can talk about this in detail in some other podcast. But if my spouse wants one, I need to be saying, no problem. I'll take care of it. I'll tell you when I've got it scheduled, and I'm on it as soon as we get through with this conversation.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Because again, it's about my character.
Yeah.
Am I going to procrastinate and put it off because it's scary, or I've heard horror stories, or something bad may happen? Okay, in spite of that, I need to be talking with my coach, counselor, mentor group. I need to be having someone who can encourage me and say, Doug, she wanted this.
Yeah.
You need to take care of this ASAP, and then to engage it.
It's about my character and her care. Right.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh,
I like that.
Let's write that down. Okay.
I like
All right.
that.
So we started talking about some of the mistakes that people make when they do disclosure. We talked about minimizing. And by the way, just as I'll give you an example. Minimizing would be saying something along the lines of, it was just porn. I didn't have an affair. Or it was just sex. It didn't mean anything.
Didn't love her.
That would be minimizing. Okay. We want to avoid language like that. Blame shifting is things like, well, yes, I was looking at porn and masturbating for, 10, 15 years, didn't tell you about it, but it's really because you don't have sex with me often enough. That's blame shifting. We don't want to do stuff like that. We talked about not sharing everything. If we're going to do a disclosure, it needs to be a full disclosure, no leaky faucet. Share a little bit here, a little bit more here, and then I'll drop the big bomb right after I've gauged whether or not you can handle it.
Yeah. Let me jump in here,
Yeah.
and then I'll let you finish.
Okay.
For me, in a disclosure, it's making allowances for my memory. And so having this conversation ahead of time before we even start the disclosure, it's okay, what's the contingency for a memory that comes up 5 years from now?
Yes.
That, I'm I don't know, watching TV, and all of a sudden, somebody says something that triggers, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I left that out, and I realize I left that out. Right. I can have one or two responses. One is terror, because it's like, oh my gosh, now she thinks I'm going to lie again.
Yeah.
Or it can be one of, okay, this is part of the process of my ongoing recovery, where I now go back and add that. I call my counselor immediately. I call my coach immediately, whatever. And I'm saying, I just remembered this. We need to put that contingency in place, come together, whatever those stipulations are. We activate that immediately, and we take care of that. And of course, there are going to be questions around that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. But we're
why
still,
did you leave this out? Why didn't you remember it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we're still working our recovery to the plan of full disclosure.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so that's part of the disclosure, is having that conversation. What do we do if
ahead of time
down the road a memory pops up that I did not disclose and I realize I didn't disclose. How do we handle that together as a couple under good care from people who are trained to do this?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Agreed.
So didn't mean to interrupt, but that kind of
really
hit me at that point.
Yeah. So one of the things I don't think gets talked about a whole lot in terms of mistakes people make is some guys will do the disclosure and then they maybe write out the disclosure in humility. They plan out the disclosure in humility, but then after the disclosure is done, then they shift into this demanding, okay, I did the disclosure. I confess. Now you have to forgive me. And we're never going to talk about this again. We did it. We had the conversation. Don't you remember 2 years ago, we had that counseling session? We don't need to bring it up ever again. That's not humble. That's not loving. That's not caring for her. And so we want to make sure that we don't make that mistake.
Right. No conversation is ever off the table.
No conversation.
So 5 years from now, or 15 or 50, if details of the disclosure come up, there's a reason why they come up. We think it's like we talked about that 10 years ago. Well, she got triggered and she needs to talk about it again.
That's right.
I need to learn how to tap into my empathy with compassion and tenderness, and sit down with her and say, hey, tell me what's going on. Let's go out, get our favorite beverage, go out on the patio, and let's talk it through.
Yeah.
That's good practice.
That's good practice. And that gives her space to grieve.
Oh, yes.
That's a mistake that I see so often is guys who are doing the disclosure. They don't give their spouse the space to grieve what's been lost. They had this dream, they had this vision of what their life, their marriage, their family looked like. That got, smashed to smithereens. And they need the time and the space to grieve that. And so we want to create that. We want to regularly create that. And so often when she is angry, when she's asking question after question after question, when she is catastrophizing, that is, and overgeneralizing as well, right? That's expression of her grief. And I want to give her the space to grieve. What I don't want to do, I use this as illustration quite a bit. What I don't want to do is in my acting out behavior, in my deception, and in my lying, I have wounded her. I've taken my sword and I've plunged it into her heart. What I don't want to do is then get mad at her that she's bleeding all over the living room floor. You're making this huge mess. Can't you stop? Can't you just clean this up? No, I want to be the one cleaning the floor. I want to be the one bringing the bandages. I want to be the one calling for the medic and saying, I understand that I hurt you and you have space to grieve.
Right. We all, and I hear this a lot, that again, it goes back to what we just were talking about. We talked about this days ago, weeks ago, years ago. Right. Why is it coming up again? Why are we talking about this now? Mm-hmm. Why do you have to bring, the very ugliness, right? Why do you have to bring this up?
Right.
We were past this. We were doing great. Our lives were peaceful and loving and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When it's a lack of understanding. Hey, something's going on inside of her.
She's hurting.
Yes.
Yeah. She's hurting. She didn't wake up and go, everything feels great, but I think I'm just going to blow it all up today.
Right.
He hasn't experienced enough pain. Right. No, she's hurting and she's expressing that.
Right.
Yeah. And so we talk at the intensive about, we recommend, hey, do this with a trained professional who has experience doing full disclosure. Don't just do it on your own. Why is that? Well, it's stuff
all
like
the things we've talked about.
All the things
here.
that we just said. You need someone who is able to say, hey, pause. All right, listen, you don't need to say that right now. Just listen. No, hold on. Just listen to her pain. You need someone who can help create those places for comfort for her. You need someone who can help walk you through developing your full disclosure, because there are some, memories hidden in the recesses.
Right.
What else would you like? Why not just do it on your own?
One of the downfalls is because there's a chance for there not to be regulation or co-regulation
Yes.
when we're doing it in the comfort and privacy of our own home.
Yeah.
And so there's not a way to keep the recovery process moving. It becomes then where I interrupt you, or I shut you down, or I get up and walk away, or I throw things, or what I mean, the gamut, right? There's all kinds of things that could happen. And we want to make it so that, okay, the metaphor I sometimes use is the full disclosure is not the wiping away of the foundation of the home.
Correct.
It's putting down a new cornerstone, saying that we can now build a marriage that we've really honestly wanted, but never knew how to go through.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's now I can look at what kind of relationship do I really want to have, and build that from that point on. And it sometimes takes a little bit, but it eventually gets through that. This is where we're going to build. This isn't about, well, everything just got torn apart, and now there's nothing but rubble.
Yeah.
Well, but to have a new house, you have to clear away the foundation to start laying a new foundation that we both really want.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's a silly metaphor, but it's a way of saying it's not the end; it's really the beginning.
Exactly.
Because most guys see it as the end.
Right. This isn't the end of recovery.
Yes.
This is the beginning. Is one of the first early steps of recovery. Agreed. Okay. We did a lot of laying the foundation in terms of full disclosure. Next week, we're going to talk with Laura Mangan McDonald, who's going to come in and correct all of our mistakes, which is wonderful, and give us a better understanding of full disclosure in part 2. We're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
A couple of things I want to remind you of. Number one is, if you've been contemplating going to the intensive, but you know financially it's just not in the picture. Listen, we say it all the time. We don't want anyone to not go to the workshop simply because of finances. If you'll call 1-800-NEW-LIFE and let them know you have a financial need, they can get a scholarship to you that helps defray the cost of the workshop. So please call 1-800-NEW-LIFE to speak to them about getting a scholarship. If you have already attended the Every Man's Battle Intensive, I want to invite you to consider coming back and being a part of the Brothers in the Battle, the alumni track. They're led by a trained therapist in the same way that the guys who are going through it the first time to help process the material. They have their own small group throughout the weekend. So I want to encourage you to consider going back as a Brothers in the Battle. And then finally, if you are an alumni and you are not a part of Sustained Victory, consider that. If you've been to an Every Man's Battle Intensive, no matter when it was, if it was 20 years ago or it was 2 months ago, you can be a part of Sustained Victory. Maybe at the time that you went through, you just weren't sure if you could swing it financially, or you weren't sure if it would fit with your schedule. But you found that, man, all the same reasons why I struggled before I left for the workshop, all the same reasons why I live in secrecy that were present then are still present when you got back. Man, Sustained Victory helps you overcome those issues, helps you have somebody that's walking this walk with you. And so I want to encourage you to call 1-800-NEW-LIFE, let them know when you went to the workshop, or just let them know you went to the workshop. They can look up when you went, and they can get you plugged in with a Sustained Victory group. They've got, I don't know how many groups there are every week. There's got to be, 60, 80, 100 groups that meet every single week. Right. There's going to be one that meets at a time that's convenient for you.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Hey, guys, thanks for listening today. We hope that this whet your appetite for full disclosure. We'll continue the discussion with Laura next week. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. This podcast is just one of the many ways we can encourage and help you. If you're looking for more help, visit us at newlife.com or call 1-800-NEW-LIFE. Please remember to review, like, and share the podcast as it helps others find us. If you have a comment about this podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at embpodcast@newlife.com. See you next week.